So today I'm going to be taking a look at the newest automatic release from Timex. And they finally decided to put an automatic in one of their divers. So let's get into it. So here we are taking a look at the newest release from Timex, which is their automatic diver. So getting into some dimensions of this watch, we can see we have about a 41mm case, and the bezel is pretty much flush with the case, so that's pretty much the dimension of the watch itself. We have about a 49.5 or even 50.5, depending if you're getting, the very extremity of the lug or the little tiny cut in there. We have a thickness from, not including the Cyclops, of about 13.5 inches. And we have a lug width of 20, which I think is pretty nice. So overall, pretty wearable dimensions, I would say. I mean, I think it would definitely be suited more to a larger wrist, because that approximate 50mm lug-to-lug distance is, on the same par with things like the larger Oris Aquis model, the Tudor Pelagos, watches like that. So it's gonna wear slightly larger on the wrist. I think if they would have cut down that lug-to-lug size, it would have been better for a small-wristed folk, but as you'll see later, I don't think it wears badly at all. So we have a mineral crystal on the front and back, but at least they did give us the quote-unquote courtesy of letting us see the movement. There's nothing special about it. There's no decoration happening. You get a nice little Timex signed rotor, I guess. But as you can see, it is a Miyota branded movement, probably close to a 42-hour, 38-hour power reserve. Accuracy, probably, in the range between -10 plus 30 seconds a day. Mine is going at around plus 10 seconds a day, which is pretty nice. But as you can see, as it said on the rotor there, these are unadjusted. So it's kind of a luck of the draw with them, and you just kind of see what you get. But yeah, and then we have, I believe, Super Luminova for the Lume, and that is all there is off the top of my head. We also have a 100-meter water resistance, but no screw-down crown. So for the dial of this watch, we can see it's this nice kind of dark forest green, which I think is an interesting choice. I mean, I personally love green, but for their first release in an automatic dive watch, to go with a more Marmite color like green instead of black or white or blue even, is an interesting choice. I think the shade of green is very nice. It's very much like a drab, military-esque leaning green. I think that type of military theme is furthered by not only the fact that this is called this is part of their Allied series, but it is also a 24-hour type of inner bezel here, which is kind of like highlighted by this little circular section in the hour hand here, which I'm very much happy that actually goes over this inner track here, because in previously pre-release photos it wasn't long enough. So thank you, Timex, for actually thinking about design there. As you can see, we have kind of applied indices, or at least surrounds, around the lume-filled markers there, which very much just mirror the outlining of silver in that hands, in the hour, in the minute, seconds. We have a nice little squares around all the hour indices here, again loomed and outlined in that silver as well. I like how Timex kept the writing on the dial very minimal. They didn't put Swiss made, Japan made, American made. Instead, they replaced it with the water resistance, which I think is a nice touch. For me personally, if I was designing a watch, I wouldn't put the water resistance on the front in the first place, because if you're buying the watch, you probably know how much it is, and if you don't, you can look on the back to find out. But I like the placement at the 6 here, because it's out of the way and not really cluttering the dial in any way. But the main text is just the Timex and the automatic. Again, I could have done without the automatic, but it does add balance to counter the Timex. So it's still nice enough there. And as you can see, we have this Cyclops magnification here for the date. I don't know if it's perfectly aligned. I mean, obviously, if I'm kind of just putting the watch straight on, it doesn't look perfect. But it is a $280 sub $300 watch, so it's not going to be perfectly aligned on every model. It is a nice addition. I wish they would have done without the Cyclops. We don't need a Cyclops, but some people like it. I think more people might hate it because it's trying to be a Rolex in a little sense. As you can see, the track out here breaks down into minute marks and then sub minute marks, which are like 15 seconds apart. So that's pretty interesting. Something I will note, and I'll try to include a picture here later or after when I'm editing, but for the regular non-automatic Allied model, it does not have this breakdown into like sub-minute marks. It's just simply the hour marks. So it just goes 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's not a breakdown between the 5 and the 6. Which I think is nice because it's a little attention to detail. It's a little more thought that went into the fact that we have a sweeping seconds. We have something that can more accurately describe the time, or at least more accurately point to seconds between seconds and minutes between full minutes. So I think that's a nice touch. On a more macro level of the watch, we see that the green really does come out to play. It has a very subtle kind of like eggshell texturing to it. Obviously not eggshell white, eggshell green, if such a thing exists, but it does have this very nice texturing to it, which I think probably helps it play with light, or at least absorb light. It's definitely nice that Timex did this instead of just having a plain green flat dial, so it just shows a little attention to detail on their part. As you can see in the applied hour indices, they do catch the light very well. However, they are pretty roughly finished in some parts. Overall, I think the finishing on the hands is actually pretty well done. I don't see any real blemishes there. I think, they aren't just straight silver hands. There's kind of like this extra coating on top of them that allows it to maybe cover up blemishes. But even if that is the truth, that is a good choice because it looks cleaner this way. The application of the Lume is pretty decently done. As you can see, there are kind of like little chunks taken out of the Lume, but overall nothing major, nothing that makes the watch look horrible or look too poorly finished. Again, this is like a sub $500 watch, sub $300 watch. So you are getting what you pay for. Some markers are done well, some have blemishes on them, but overall I think it's nicely done. Something I didn't really notice at a non-macro level was the fact that, as I mentioned earlier, these hands are done in this kind of like gray matte texturing, while the indices are actually, just regular silver, so they just are stainless steel. So they just play with the light differently than the hands do, as they're more of a matte texturing. Overall, not too much misprinting. I see there's like a little trouble with the bottom of the 8 there, but I think overall very well done. Not too bad for the price. Obviously, almost none of these blemishes, marks, small imperfections can you see even from the wrist. So yeah, good on you, Timex. So you can see Timex with its type of super luminova type of the Lume thing, that the hands are much brighter than the indices. And that's just kind of what happens on lower tier watches. It's something that you're going to have to live with, something you're going to have to accept. The Lume's not going to be exceptional on this watch. Something I do like is the Lume pip is actually pretty well done and almost matches the intensity of the hands, the hour and minute hands. Something I do particularly like is there's a good differentiation between the hour minute hand, because that circle cut out in the minute hand allows there to be a little tip on the end that just kind of differentiates it in the dark. So something I kind of notice is as the minute hand swipes the dial, it kind of illuminates the 24-hour track, as you can kind of see as I'm moving it around, and it's just showcasing the numerals as it goes along. And when it lines up back with the hour hand, it's kind of hard to see when I'm not all loomed up still. But as you can see there, it very briefly kind of like illuminates the hour that it is in the dark. Again, hard to pick up on the camera just because my camera doesn't do such a great job at it. But I'm telling you, in person, it is a lot easier to see, and it's just a pretty interesting thing. If I loom it up one more time, you can kind of see the hour hand is illuminating both 13 and 14. It's allowing the hour hand to both kind of trap in the 13 and show what hour it is. Quickly comparing the Lume to the Timex Snoopy, you can see the Snoopy is a lot brighter, the color temperature is a lot more pleasing. Again, the Timex automatic Lume is not great, doesn't last very long, but I mean, they put it on the watch, so you know, I guess kudos to them for that. So moving on to the case of this watch, and I guess the bezel as well, we can see we have this black bezel with this white inlay. It's not aluminum, it's obviously not ceramic, maybe it's plastic. I honestly don't know what this is, but it's not too badly done. It does pick up kind of like smudges and fingerprints a little bit, but I don't think it looks too badly. As you can see, we have this kind of circular radial brushing along all the tops of the lugs here, which I think overall is a nice addition. I mean, not something they had to do, but I think it ties in nicely. As you can see, we have a finish along the edges of the bezel here. If we go to the case sides, we have all brushed finishings. This one, if I can pick it up, is brushed horizontally along the whole case flank, along the whole case side. No sign in the crown, or no logo in the crown here, but it is polished, I guess. We have this pretty nice kind of like trapezoidal triangular crown guards here. Nothing groundbreaking, but it does protect the crown. Not a lot of wobble or anything in the crown either, which I think is nice. A decent knurling on the crown, so not the thing that's going to blow you away, but I don't think you'll have trouble gripping it either. And again, not a screw down. If we go to the case back, we can see we do have polishing here under the sides. It's nice that they brushed out this section here to write the lettering on, and we can see here between the strap that this is actually all polished as well, which I kind of don't like because it kind of just takes away from the all brushed look, especially when you have it on a strap. It's kind of shining out between the watch, so you know, not my favorite choice there, but I guess it kind of does match with the polish of the bezel. But again, we just have on the case back, we have just some general information: water resistance 100 meters, stainless steel, the model number, automatic movement. For some reason they put the lug width on the back, which I haven't seen before. And yeah, and of course you have the undecorated movement there, and the Allied collection, because this is the Navi XL, part of the Allied collection. But overall, I think the case is pretty decently done. As you can see, the lugs do make an effort to sweep down, and as you have this kind of almost non-curvaceous area here, it reaches the end and is like, dang, we really need to start curving. So it does have this very drastic curve here, and then ends into another flat area. But overall, it comes very close to trying to reach the bottom of the case back. I think as the case back sits into the wrist a little bit, the lugs do allow the watch to hug your wrist a little bit better, which I think is nice, rather than just having completely flared out straight lugs, which would sit like a block, and with 50 millimeters lug to lug, it would just not look good on smaller wrists like mine. But overall, not badly done on the case. I'm glad they went with an all brush finish because it'll show less scratches over time. So here we have the Timex on my 6.5 inch wrist. It is nearing the extremity of what I would say is comfortable for me to wear. It is not overhanging the ends of my wrist, but it's getting there. Overall, again, as I said, the case back does kind of just sit into the bottom of the wrist, which allows the lugs to do a nice curving onto the wrist. So I think overall, as long as you get a good strap, or maybe a Perlon, a NATO, a rubber strap like this, it does allow it to conform pretty nicely to the wrist. I think the size is, as Timex I think would have gone for a dive watch, this is very much a crowd pleaser. You know, it will fit larger wrists. As you can see with my small wrist, it does fit. It doesn't look too large or overbearing. And although I understand why they went with the bigger size, I think if they would have made it a 38 millimeter, that would have been great. But you know, all wishes can come true, and the larger wristed will definitely enjoy this watch. Now if we get into the bezel action here, it is actually very, very stiff, kind of even hard to move. You're not going to move this on accident. It has a very defined click. We have a 120 click bezel, and honestly there's not a lot of back play, if any at all, so that's a nice addition for the watch. But you know, the bezel is actually just very tight, so it's actually not very pleasurable to use, but at least it does line up. It does function. It has a decent clicking sound to it. It's just the fact that it is a little hard to operate. And all the polished texture in this grip looks nice. It is not quite grippy enough. It doesn't, my hands can't get enough of a purchase on it to really just easily grip and turn it. I do really have to like kind of dig my hands into the bezel in order to turn. So that's kind of a bummer, but you know, overall I think the watch wears nicely, looks nicely. From the wrist, I think it definitely does give a kind of vintage feel with that slightly off colored lume, as well as the green military-esque bezel, or not bezel, but sorry, green military-esque dial. Here it is very quickly on the stock strap. I think it was a nice choice that they went with this kind of vintagey but also lighter brown leather. I think it does look good on the watch. It does match the green very well. It's just the kind of typical Timex, you know, cardboardy feeling leather. As you can see, apparently it is part of their, you know, like special Red Wing straps that they put on some of their higher end Waterbury models and whatnot. Honestly, the strap doesn't feel too bad on a wrist. It does conform nicely. It doesn't feel necessarily cheap or bad. But overall, I mean, I don't think this is a strap you're gonna love to keep on the watch. Definitely can find better ones out there. But you do get a nice little signed and brushed Timex buckle right here, which matches, you know, the brushing that's found throughout most of the watch as well. So starting off with the pros of the Timex, I think they did make it in a decent size. It obviously caters a little bit to larger wrists because, you know, the 50 millimeter lug length, but you know, as you saw in the earlier shots, it doesn't wear too horribly on my wrists, and I don't think it looks out of proportion in any way. I also think they did a very good job with the dial. There's a lot of applied things. It's not just a printed flat dial. There's actually some visual interest in there. The coloration of the dial in itself, the nice kind of like eggshell green texturing that they had there was pretty cool. I like that they went for an all brushed finish for the watch. It's just gonna help it like hold up better over time, not show scratches as easily, and the brushing doesn't look too bad. It's not like a super fine detailed hand brushing type of thing, but you know, it's a decent job done. And overall, I think they made a good design that doesn't err too much on the side of Rolex homage. So that's refreshing to see. So moving on to the cons of the watch, starting with the bezel. Even though it does have a nice like ratchety type feel, it is not the easiest bezel to move. So if you're going to be wanting to actually use that bezel on a normal basis, it's going to be kind of a, I would say, drawback of the watch, because it just is so hard to grip, so hard to move, so hard to just operate really. Another slight con I would give the Timex is just kind of like the lack of information they give about the movement that they use. You know, I mean, I know that they maybe cater to sometimes the non-watch community with their releases, and maybe they don't want to bog people down with too much details, too much naming. But I honestly feel like most of the people who are going to buy this watch are watch enthusiasts. So knowing what type of movement, what the beat rate is, how many joules it has, it's, you know, something useful. So I think that's something they could have included. I definitely think the watch could have gone without a Cyclops. I don't know why they felt the need to put the Cyclops in there, maybe to just kind of make people familiar with the watch who know the Rolex sub, but I think it can do well without the Cyclops. Again, it's a large watch. It's pretty legible, so I don't think it really needs that part. But overall, I think it's a pretty good watch. It doesn't have a lot of faults. Most of them are very minor, you know. I mean, there's like some small imperfections on the dial, which, you know, aren't noticeable unless you go to macro level. Other than that, you know, the original strap isn't very great, but you can always switch it out. And 20 millimeter lug width means you have so many options to choose from. And, you know, just overall, again, good watch, good specs, decent size. They could have lowered the price slightly. I mean, it is in line with the new Seiko 5s, and between the Timex and the Seiko 5s, I'd probably lean towards the Timex just because I prefer the design. I prefer the uniqueness of like the 24 hours, the cutout hour hand. I like that the Seikos come in more colors and combination. That's nice. So I think Timex can do well if they release, you know, plain black model, a blue dial, something like that, you know. But I really appreciate just the route Timex is going in. You know, they're releasing more automatics. They're releasing even smaller sized watches. They just released like a woman's automatic, or at least they, you know, claim it's woman's, even though it's like a 38 millimeter. That's like the Celestial one. It's kind of like one of those like mystery hour watches, which is pretty cool. And I think if Timex continues at the rate they're going, they can have a lot of good lines on their hands and probably take up a good portion of the lower end market. So if you're looking to buy the watch, I think it's a good watch for the money. There's not a lot of other competitors out there for that price for a dive watch. I mean, you can go like the Orient Mako, the Orient Ray, things just like that. But I think where the Timex wins is probably just, you know, you liking the design. The design is pretty cool. The green, I think, is a very unique color. It's not too in your face. But yeah, it's my opinion. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.